Yep. So today, Unit 3, Lesson 5, we're almost finished with this entire unit. There's just a few more lessons, which tomorrow will be actually sort of writing a whole response and then reviewing it. So today it's writing the introduction and conclusion for your extended response. And today the idea is by the time you complete this lesson, you will be able to write an introduction to gain readers' attention and write a conclusion that will help readers think beyond your writing. So let's take a look here, listen to our little bit of audio.
The body of your extended response, which will include all of your arguments, points of comparison, and examples from the passage, should come between a thoughtful introduction and conclusion. The purpose of the introduction, or lead, is to gain readers' attention and prepare them for the thesis, which is often the final sentence of the introduction. The purpose of the conclusion, on the other hand, is to confirm or prove the thesis by summarizing the main ideas and details of the extended response. The conclusion also should leave readers with a final thought or call to action that will help them think about the topic beyond the extended response.
Yeah, that's it, basically. So the introduction, right? You want to kind of grab your reader. You want them to, gain an interest in what you're going to say. So, and we'll see some strategies for that here in a minute. And then you build to, the best way to go about it is at the end, basically the last sentence or two is to assert your thesis at the end there. And the conclusion, it's largely a summary. You're going to kind of restate your thesis in a way, and you're going to sort of point out in sort of a succinct idea, why what your argument was, sort of a support of your argument, and then leave them something to think about. Basically, that's the whole idea of the conclusion. And of course, you sandwich your evidence into the body, so it's same framework, whether it's a book or it's 5 paragraphs. It's introduction, body, and conclusion. That's the way we're going to think about it. That's your large framework, and then we've talked about how to fill in the rest of that. So the strategies they have here for introductions, right? So an action strategy would be to begin with a description of someone doing something, such as posting an assignment in an online class. The next dialogue quotation style, which would be begin with a conversation in the chat room of a virtual classroom, right? That's sort of their idea, that you're speaking to like people in a chat room or something like that. Or with a quotation, right, from an expert or in the subject area. So you could use a quote or maybe statistics, something like that, from the writing that you're from like the 2 passages to grab somebody's attention. Or finally, a reaction. So use thinking verbs such as consider, remember, or reflect as you relate the thoughts of someone such as an online student or teacher. So, you'd say something like, you may, consider online education and, this forth, so forth, so on, wonder, any sort of those thinking verbs, ponder, something like that, to sort of draw attention to what you're going to say. And then in the text box, so it says, after using one of these strategies, transition to the thesis. For example, the growing popularity of such online classes has stimulated debate regarding their value. Authors such as Clift and Jones are weighing in with differing opinions. And then the next sentence after that will be your thesis statement. And that would wrap up your introduction. You would lead in with one of these introduction strategies. They get kind of technical here, sort of parsing them out into different, sort of naming them. But the idea is really to grab your reader's attention. So, how you do that, it doesn't have to fits so tightly into one of these strategies, but you're going to sort of use it whether you're really cognizant of it or not. And the same thing for conclusion strategy. So you may want to use an anecdote. So you end with a short story that supports your thesis. Connection. So you end by connecting with your audience. How does the argument affect them? Or a factor statistic, right? So you can go back to the passages and you end with something memorable or shocking factor statistic to support your thesis. And so it says here, before using one of these strategies for a final thought, you start by summarizing. So first you summarize the thesis, the main ideas and important details, and then by restating them in different words. So yeah, you lead in with your thesis again. And again, it's largely restating it and summarizing. That's the idea of the conclusion. Summarize your overall writing, and then you can end with something like one of these strategies here, just to really strengthen your overall argument and your writing. And that's sort of what we'll do today, is work with these and sort of formulate a or create an introduction and a conclusion as we go along. And we'll just they didn't put the writings for us to use. So we'll go ahead, since we've been working with the Clift and Jones passages, we'll just use those for our introduction and conclusion. So have to kind of, recall a little bit from those two passages. Let's start our quiz. Okay. It's the same thing, right? Action, dialogue, quotation, or reaction, and then anecdote, connection, factor, statistic for conclusion, strategy. So what it says about test taking tips. So when beginning the conclusion of your extended response, use one of these transitions. So we're going to, you'd start with, finally, eventually. I'd prefer something like in conclusion, right? Because that really draws readers' attention to what you're about to do. I've mentioned this before. A lot of academic writing, they come right out and tell you my thesis is, or my argument in their introduction, and very similar in the conclusion. So yeah, don't be afraid to use these types of transition statements. Sometimes they sound kind of fancy, but it really does help guide the reader, and help them understand when you're moving to a new point, or you're adding information, or in this case, when you are concluding, when you're wrapping things up. So, and you could use that too, like finally, that's a good one if you're making your third point, right? So like in your third paragraph, you say, finally, this point, so-and-so, which we'll look at tomorrow as we put it all together. And our one little multiple choice question here. Grace, you want to read our question for us?
All right. Which statement is an example of an action lead? A, online education is a growing trend at many secondary and post-secondary campuses. B, today, many adult students wonder how they will work and go to school at the same time. C, how am I supposed to transfer 3 pages of lecture notes to a few screens? Asked Professor Clift. And D, Jefferson clicked the submit button and waited for confirmation of his enrollment in the online English course. D.
Yeah, right, because it's an action. You're describing an action there. So just like it says here, begin with a description of someone doing something. Like in this case, they're submitting to do this class. They're adding this class, this online class. So let's take a look here. Now what they want us to do, right? Fill in the space below with the requested information about your introduction. So remember to use the thesis statement you developed in lesson 2. Now we looked at a couple different strategies, right? You remember we had this template that we looked at. So we will use one of these to make our thesis statement. So keep these in mind as you do your own. It's pretty straightforward. You don't have to get fancy, right? We're not reinventing the wheel. They're giving us this information, so make use of it. Okay. And so what it asks here, so which lead strategy are you selecting? So, remember, we're dealing with the online education. So, we want to make a statement to start right off the bat, our very first sentence in the introduction, using either action, a dialogue, quotation, reaction. And as it says too, if there's something else that grabs you, don't freeze up because you can't find something that falls so, right into one of these other categories. If there's something else that speaks to you, use it. And just keep in mind, ask yourself, does it grab the reader's attention? So I was thinking that we could maybe
use quotation.
Use a quotation? Okay.
Yeah, because I remember Clift quoted in the passage. You say we are using Clift, right? Online.
Clift and Jones. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember he quoted in the second paragraph, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, which one are you? Which one?
It was about someone coming from, is it baseball? He quoted, unless I go and check that that passage.
Was it the student? Like,
no, it was he Clift quoted. He said virtual community, and then he quoted.
Oh, okay, about the virtual community. Okay.
Yeah.
Let's see. I'm going to see if I can pull up those readings somehow, so we can. That might be a better strategy here. So just hang with me for a second. I'll see if I can just save it as an image, and then we can pull it up and take a look at it. So let's see, we saw it yesterday, right? Let me see if I can find it real quick. Sorry about that. I should have thought about that earlier. It'd make things easier if we can at least reference the. Let's see where they are. It's here. Okay, here we go. So let me see if I could copy both of them. Let me pull up Word, and I'll dump it into a Word document. That way we can at least have that. And this is what you're talking about, right, Grace? Virtual community is.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is it a quotation?
It is. Well, let me see. It doesn't reference the person, but she's using quotes. So there's definitely a quotation. Now, the other thing is, it doesn't have to be an existing quote. Like, you can just quote any part of the passage. Right. So that's the other thing. Yeah, I just want to make that clear. So we could, and you could use a statistic. You could use, let's see if I can do this without grabbing a bunch of other crap here. Here we go. Hopefully this works. Keep our fingers crossed. We can just paste that into Word. There we go. Okay. Now at least we can reference those writings there. Okay. Good. And let me get back to our lesson. Okay. Oh, no, I should have just opened GWiz. Okay, here we go. So we could use, like you said, we could use virtual community. Or I was also thinking this. So Jones, right, mentions that 32% of college students take at least one online class. So that sort of grabs the reader, right, and offers a you know, sort of like very, you know, it's like, okay, we're talking about online education. We're talking about the amount of students who are now taking it. So what do you guys think? What way do we want to go? What do you think? Or we could, as Grace said, we could put virtual community is the ultimate contradiction in terms, according to what's her name, Elaine Clift. What do you think about that, Grace? Is that kind of what you're going for?
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll start with we could do it one of two ways. We could say according to Elaine Clift. A virtual community is the ultimate contradiction in terms. A virtual community is the ultimate. I don't have trouble spelling today. Ultimate contradiction. And I will copy and paste that into the chat as well when we're finished here. In terms. Okay. There should be a comma there. So is that we want to use for our opening, our lead-in strategy? Everybody feel good about that? Okay, so let me copy that. And that is it's a pretty good strategy. All right, so let's paste here so everybody can get that. Now, what it's wanting here, fill in space below with the requested information. So develop a transition from the lead strategy to the thesis. So we need several sentences here, at least a couple probably, before we get into our thesis statement. So we could sort of transition. So, right, we have her sort of idea. We could also say, you know, nevertheless, there's a growing, the popularity of online education has grown, something like that, right? So we put in some contrast between her statement and, you know, sort of blending in the other passage. Or what other strategy, anything else that we want to use? What do you think, guys? and then we could, look at yeah, so it's basically, whatever sort of idea that you want to use here, as long as it's going to add some information as far as like what we're discussing, right, which is online education, and that is going to lead into the thesis statement. So we'll go with something like, nevertheless, online education has grown in popularity. And we're going to, finish out. I think next they want us to you actually write our thesis. Okay, so we'll need a couple sentences here. So nevertheless, online education has grown in popularity. Cliff, here's a little tip for you. Once you've introduced an author, you can just use their last name. So say Clift and I can't remember the other guy's name. It's Jones something. Clift and Carl Jones. Carl Jones offer opposing, we put points of view on the Clift and Carl Jones offer opposing points of view regarding online education. Okay. And then, right, so we got our first sentence right. According to Elaine Clift, a virtual community is the ultimate contradiction in terms. Second, nevertheless, online education has grown in popularity. Clift and Carl Jones offer opposing points of view regarding online education. All right, I'll copy and paste that. Chat. Okay. And then we'll lead into our thesis statement. So first off, which side are we taking? I'll leave it up to you and we'll work it out. So do we want to go with Jones, that online education has benefits, and support that and believe that's the more compelling, convincing argument? Or do we want to say Elaine Clift's?
Good. Jones.
Okay, Jones.
Oh,
I was
yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of that mindset anyway. And remember, Nilda says Cliff.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll tell you what, Nilda. So I had mentioned yesterday. Okay, yeah, we'll stick with Grace here and do the Jones. I told him yesterday I'm going to do some examples for you guys. Some actually make some extended responses. I might go ahead and do that this evening. So tomorrow when we're writing the whole thing out, we'll be able to see it. So I'll tell you what, I will use Clift as I will support Clift's argument with that one, and maybe do another one with Jones or with the other passages, just so we have some few different examples. So today, right now, we'll go ahead with Jones. And then just for variety's sake and seeing how the other ones will work, we'll work those in as well. But for now, since we're going with Jones, and I want to sort of incorporate yesterday's class where we talked about our 3 points, right? So our point of view, our reason, and our tone. Okay. Looking at our templates. That's what I was going for. I was trying to get to our templates here of how, writing a thesis statement. I sort of like the while introduction because you get to talk a little bit about both authors and you get to lead in with, so it's that sort of, qualifying idea. So we start with the one. So we'll say while Cliff argues that online education lacks quality materials and is a poor time investment for teachers, right? The other thing you want to do, make sure you're not directly quoting, right? You want to paraphrase, and unless you need to, which we did in the beginning there with a quote. So if you're directly lifting language, make sure you use quotations, but you want to try to paraphrase and use your own words as much as you can. So while Clift argues that online education lacks quality materials and is a poor time investment for teachers, and then we go down. Got too many apps open. Jones, right? So Jones makes a better argument. Jones makes a better argument for online education because his point of view, reasons, and tone are more convincing. Okay, you guys following along there? So while Clift argues that online education lacks quality materials and is a poor time investment for teachers, Jones makes a better argument for online education because his point of view, reasons, and tone are more convincing. And then, of course, as we get into that, we'll actually explain, what those are. Okay. So copy and paste here. Okay. And of course, when we just try to do this together so you guys get some examples, all of that is fair game. Any one of those sort of templates for your argument, if one works better for you, use it. I'm just, trying to get us an example to put together here for the class. Okay. So now we transition to a conclusion. Okay. So choose a transition to open the conclusion. So remember up here, talking about transition statements, I would go with in conclusion, right? Anyone, finally works, but the thing for me with eventually or finally, you might want to use those in the body of your paragraphs, right? So you may say, you may open with a point, and then your second paragraph, you might say secondly. And then the last paragraph of your body, you might say lastly or finally. So just sort of in reserving those. So something like in conclusion, right, might be the better way to go. So right away, we'll go with in conclusion. Let's see if they want to split anything else. Take the thesis. Okay, so all we need right there is in conclusion, right? Our transition statement. Boom. So then we go down. In conclusion, we'll go ahead and put that in there again. Jones, and here we could start, looking at maybe using, let's see what they have us doing next, rephrase important points. Okay, so Jones offers a more compelling, convincing, whatever you want to use there, argument for the benefits of online education based on his point of view, or you could say claim, right? Just to kind of switch it up because they're the same thing. Claim, reasons, and tone. Okay, you don't have to include Cliff again. You just have to, that's the main point of your argument, right? You're going with the one. So Jones offers a more compelling argument for the benefits of online education based on his or for, well, we just say for online education, so we don't get confused there. Okay. Copy and paste. And then we get into sort of summarizing how we did that. So we can look at sort of their claim. So we could, here we could reintroduce Cliff. So we could say, Cliff's point of view, and sort of thinking beyond just right. So we can think about part of her point of view is the fact that she is speaking from her own personal experience, right? While Jones's point of view was also speaking towards that experience of students. And again, we'll check them off as we go. So we'll start with the claim point of view part, then we'll go to the reasons, and then we'll go to the tone. And again, we're just sort of rephrasing those important points. We're not expounding on them anymore, just what we found. So Cliff's point of view that online education lacks quality materials and how do we state that in the beginning? Lacks quality materials and is a poor time investment for teachers. Poor time investment for teachers is derived from her own experience. Jones, however, uses the experience of students to show the flexibility of online education. Right. Uses. What is going on here? Why is it lighting up red? Did I not? I don't know what that was about. Okay, so Cliff's point of view, online education lacks quality materials and is a poor time investment for teachers, is derived from her own experience. Jones, however, uses the experience of students to show the flexibility of online education. Okay, so that covers our first point, right? The point of view, the claims that they made. So we move on to reasons. Which part of that for Jones is the flexibility. So actually, let me review that. I might want to change the wording in that. Yeah, so he says flexibility, right? Okay, so reasons. So Cliff uses reasons like her inability to connect with students online and education and how does she word it? So ultimately, I should engage true professional. I find it very difficult to communicate with people for whom I have no face. So we'll just say this. We'll say Cliff uses her reasons like her difficulty communicating with people, and then you could quote that last piece with people for whom she has no face. That would be fine. Okay. So right there, we're just adding in that little bit here. Difficult to communicate with people for whom I have no face. Actually, what we need to do for whom, all right, you want to make sure that you're actually have no face. So Cliff uses reasons like her difficulty communicating with people for whom I have no face. We don't need another set of quotations in there. Okay. Jones, on the other hand, using those transition statements, offers reasons like and then we talked about the flexibility, right? Or self-management. So we'll say the or self-management, either way, just has to whatever we put in the body. So the flexibility, since we're sticking with that. The flexibility that a standard classroom, and we'll quote that too, that a standard classroom cannot match. Okay. Then we could say, we could actually use lastly as well here, something like that. Lastly, Cliff's tone is largely negative. And I'm going to put this in all in one sentence. So, and while that may appeal to some, Jones's optimistic tone about the future of online education is more promising. Something like that, right? So how does that sound here? So we have all of our points, right? Cliff's point of view that online education lacks quality materials and is a poor investment for teachers is derived from her own experience. Jones, however, uses the experience of students to show the flexibility of online education. Cliff uses reasons like her difficulty communicating with people for whom I have no face. Jones, on the other hand, offers reasons like the flexibility that a standard classroom cannot match. Lastly, Cliff's tone is largely negative, and while that may appeal to some, Jones's optimistic tone about the future of online education is more promising, or compelling, or convincing, whatever you might want to put there. All right. And that is rephrasing the points of comparison, contrast, and so forth, right? That would be fleshed out more in the body of the paragraphs. We're just basically recapping what those were. And it's kind of weird because we'll be working with that more tomorrow. But I'll try to incorporate a lot of this in the examples that we use. Okay, so here we go. That is rephrasing the major points and supporting examples, right? And then the final thought strategy that we're selecting. Any ideas here? Do we want to use a fact or statistic? Do we want to try to make a connection? We could use an anecdote. I'll tell you what, I'm going to use a statistic. We're going to look at, we'll use that 32%, right? I've just been dying to use this. So statistics show that about 32% of college students take at least one online class. So Jones states that 32% of, make sure I get this right, 32% of college students take at least one online class. This statistic shows popularity of online education and we could use indicate, something like that. So that yeah, say that. So this statistic shows the popularity of online education. And that the just trying to figure out how to say basically that it's here to stay, right? Online will continue in future. While Cliff not want to continue to offer online education in her own career. Jones makes the case that more teachers should pay attention to this developing trend. What do you guys think of that? Jones states that 32% of college students take at least one online class. This statistic shows the popularity of online education and indicates that online learning will continue, we'll say, to grow in the future. Grow in the future. While Cliff does not want to continue to offer online education in her own career, Jones makes the case that more teachers should pay attention to this developing trend. Sound good? And I think we'll get to put it all together here. Actually, we'll kind of read through it, what we have here, so we can see. So pasting here. Sometimes working in these little segments feels a little disjointed. So we'll put together, first we'll go ahead and read our introduction, okay? So we have for our introduction, right? According to Elaine Clift, a virtual community is the ultimate contradiction in terms. Nevertheless, online education has grown in popularity. Clift and Carl Jones offer opposing points of view regarding online education. While Clift argues that online education lacks quality materials and is a poor time investment for teachers, Jones makes a better argument for online education because his point of view, reasons, and tone are more convincing. Okay, that's our introduction with the thesis at the end. In conclusion, we use for our transition statement. Jones offers a more compelling argument for online education based on his claim, reason, and tone. Cliff's point of view that online education lacks quality materials and is a poor time investment for teachers is derived from her own experience. Jones, however, uses the experiences of students to show the flexibility of online education. Clift uses reasons like her difficulty communicating with people for whom I have no face. Jones, on the other hand, offers reasons like the flexibility that a standard classroom cannot match. Lastly, Clift's tone is largely negative, and while that may appeal to some, Jones' optimistic tone about the future of online education is more promising. Jones states that 32% of students take at least one online class. This statistic shows the popularity of online education and indicates that online learning will continue to grow in the future. While Clift does not want to continue to offer online education in her own career, Jones makes the case that more teachers should pay attention to this developing trend. I think that sounds pretty good myself. Before we move on, I'm going to copy and paste all of this into that Word document that I opened up. So if we need to reference that later, we can have that available. So copy here. Spaces. Paste there. Lots of copy and paste. Copy, paste, copy, paste. Copy. We'll actually kind of get to see it as a whole, which I think will help too. Number 5, Nilda, I'll go ahead and copy and paste that back into the, actually I'm right on it right now. Hey, how about that? So it was just in conclusion. It was just looking for the transition from that you're going to put into your conclusion. So, right, so I just restate it here and put it all together into one transitional phrase. So, next paragraph, paste. Copy. Wow, look at that. Okay, and it's kind of crazy. Didn't really look, when you break it down, it doesn't look like much, right? But now we put it into a document like that, we actually see how much we put together. So yeah, might be able to flesh out the introduction a little bit more, but that, also not necessary. We have all the elements, right? We have sort of an opening strategy, we have a transition, and then we go into our thesis, and then here, right, we have our whole conclusion. And that is a very well-formed paragraph, no doubt. So I'll save that later if we need to use it for anything else, or I might, kind of restate that stuff so we can switch it to use Clift as the more convincing argument. I can draw points out of that. All right, so we'll go ahead and submit here. And we'll roll over to the workbook. All right. So on to the workbook. And again, just stating that the introduction of an essay is called a lead because it guides readers into the essay's subject and thesis. The introduction has 2 functions: to get readers' attention and to introduce the thesis. You may accomplish these goals by using introductory strategies such as action, dialogue, quotation, or reaction, and then transitioning to the thesis statement. And they're giving very formal names to these things. You could also just straight up say, like, online education is becoming more popular in the United States, or you could even, it says use an anecdote for your conclusion, but you could start with an anecdote, something along the lines like with more people seeking to return to school as adults are looking for, flexibility, or, something like that. Sort of an anecdote about, people that aren't involved in traditional education. Now, of course, remember, when you get to your writing response, it's going to be two different prompts or two different passages. It might be on, a completely different topic, but you could use sort of an anecdote like that, anything that kind of draws in the reader. And then the closing section of an essay is the conclusion, right? So research suggests that conclusion is the part of the essay that readers are most likely to remember, right? This is going to be the last thing to read. So as it says here, so you should restate the thesis and summarize the main points of the essay. However, it also must ask readers to think about the topic beyond the act of reading the essay, so giving them something to consider. So you may use strategies such as anecdotes, connections, or facts to leave readers with an interesting concluding thought or call to action. And of course, you need to pull those from the passages, right? You can't just insert other information, because it's, should only fall into the two passages that you're reading there. And here, right, so we have now they're looking at Clement and Leon. So you remember the thing about social media and texting and all of that. So here's what they have for introduction and conclusion. So they're kind of using that, is it action sort of strategy or dialogue? Let's see here. So you've selected 5 items for purchase in the grocery store. You're in a hurry to get home, so you choose the speedy checkout line. There are 2 customers ahead of you. The cashier finishes the first person, but the second fails to move forward. He is texting. If this scenario seems familiar to you, you're not alone. People everywhere are multitasking and not doing it well. Although authors such as Christine Leung sing the praises of social media, Marcia Clement makes a stronger argument against social media in her article, Social Media Becoming a Distraction. Okay, so there we have this introduction to grab you, right? It's sort of putting you in the shoes. Maybe you have experienced this. Transitioning, right, by the, towards the end there, people everywhere are multitasking and not doing it well. There's our kind of transition to our thesis. And then, although authors such as Christine Leung sing the praises of social media, Marcia Clement makes a stronger argument against it. So right there at the end of the thesis. It says here, this introduction illustrates the action strategy, right? So that's what they mean by an action, describing somebody, doing something. In this case, standing in line at the grocery store. So the writer uses the active verb selected to describe a social media related scenario from the reader's point of view. The writer then transitions to the thesis statement. So like for our other passage, you could say something like, you may, you've decided to return to school. Unfortunately, with your schedule and having young children, you find going back to a traditional classroom too difficult, right? And then you could add that's like, online education could be a option, as an option for many. Got bloop. Then you go, a transition by introducing Cliff and Jones, and then your thesis statement. So that's a really good strategy too. Sort of inserting the reader right into that. That way you're kind of immersing them into the writing by including them. And then the conclusion, right? So it says, in conclusion, Clement makes a stronger case against social media by citing credible scientific evidence from Rosen and Subra, there's that crazy name again, Subra Maniam, about the disturbing effects of social media on the brain. In concluding their disruption of sleep patterns and the brain's ability to focus, Leung's anecdotal evidence from a reading language arts teacher pales in comparison, right? So pointing out the types of evidence they used. While people may be charmed by the convenience of social media, they must resist the technological dumbing down of modern culture while they still have the brain power to do so, right? So this conclusion illustrates the connection strategy. The writer suggests that readers who fall for the charms of social media do so at the risk of limiting their brain function, right? So connecting the issue with the person, sort of what they do in the introduction too, by inserting, the person into the idea of standing in line and being, behind somebody who's texting. And then in the conclusion, also engaging them. Do you want to be one of these people? That's part of the dumbing down of modern culture. So it's a little bit of a bandwagon, but it's a it's a legitimate way to conclude there. Okay. So furthering our ideas here, right? So there's our introduction and conclusion. And then using logic here. So authors use transition words both within and between paragraphs, right? I use some of those within my paragraph and I used them at the beginning. Note that in the introduction above, the writer moves from the specific to the general and uses the contrasting transition although, right? So, we keep pointing these out right at the beginning of the conclusion, right? They use in conclusion there to address that changing element. All right, we're switching gears here and we're going to our conclusion. So let's see here. Sasha Gay, how about you read our question here? Number 1.
Which statement is an example of a surprising concluding fact or statistic? A, next time, think about using a group text to call the family to dinner. The response may be quicker. B, teenagers send about 60 texts per day and use texting as their dominant means of communication. C, during dinner time at the Martinez house, family members sit at a table and text friends and coworkers. D, how many times per day do you text when you're supposed to be doing something else? Is it A?
It's B, right? So 60 texts per day. And, it's not always, but if it's a statistic, right, it's usually going to involve some numbers, a percentage or an average or something like that, right? So teenagers send about 60 texts per day. And it's also going to be something that's fairly concrete, right? It won't use any type of qualifying language. It shouldn't anyway. So, it won't be like most people do this or these people should do that. It'll have like some real concrete, evidence behind it. So B as in boy for our surprising concluding factor statement that she uses, right? So now we got a little bit of drag and drop here before we go on to some more writing. So looking at action, dialogue, and quotation, right? So these 3 strategies for conclusions. So action, what is an action statement here out of the 3?
You call your son, your daughter, or spouse to dinner.
So, right, that's an action, right? Calling your son, daughter, or spouse to dinner. You could use something like that, right? Which is what the original author did. So, dialogue, quotation. What do we have for dialogue or quotation?
Right now with social networks.
And other internet. Yep, 500 million people have a way to say what they're thinking and have their voice be heard, from Mark Zuckerberg. So yeah, so again, quotation will often include like statistics and stuff like that. But of course, right, one thing we always know quotation is going to have, right, quotation marks. So we get a quotation there from Mr. Zuckerberg. And then of course that leaves reaction. So the appeal of socializing online has created a nation of mobile device fans, many of whom can go barely 10 minutes without checking their smartphones. Okay. So we're all green there. Okay. And So next, right? So same idea. Conclusion strategy. So we have our introduction strategy, right? We choose an action, dialogue, reaction. And like I said, if there's something else that kind of falls somewhere in that realm that you can't, specifically say this is action or this is dialogue, quotation, or this is reaction, it doesn't mean it, is a legitimate way to start your introduction. It's all about that leading into and transitioning to your thesis. And then for conclusion, right? So we have some strategies here. So action. What do we have here? I'm sorry, not action, anecdote. So where do we see an anecdote here? Remember what we say about anecdotes. It's sort of a specific example.
Perhaps the next time.
During dinner time. Yeah. They mention a specific family, right? The Martinez house. So it's always going to have, sort of a story of an individual or a family. The thing is, like we always say about anecdotes, it's only one, single experience. It may involve, multiple people, like a family, but it, doesn't always speak to the whole, right? It's just that one instance here. But, it's a fine strategy here when you're concluding. And then connection. Which one's a connection here?
Perhaps.
Perhaps.
There you go. Yeah, perhaps the next time to call the family to dinner, it might be more efficient to send a group text, right? So connecting the reader to the idea, to the text, speaking largely to them. And then, of course, we have our fact statistic again. So while the long-term effects of such behavior are unknown, research has shown that interruptions make it harder for the brain to consolidate the day's learning and memories, right? Which we talked about. And we also talked about that idea that it's a qualifying statement, right? So while long-term effects of such behavior are unknown, right? That's something that we discussed with that reading. Now, so write an action introduction for your thesis statement. So again, we'll go ahead and continue with Clift and Jones, and we'll think about, an action. So what we want to go with here. So thinking about, that online education, what I was saying earlier about an action. So we'll do this. We'll say you've decided to return to school even for this. So you decide to return to school to earn, we'll say an associate's degree, but because of your work schedule and obligations at home, a traditional classroom setting is not possible. It's not possible for you. Okay, so yeah, so you decided to return to school to earn your associate's degree. traditional classroom setting is not possible for you. And so that's the action, right? Deciding to return to school. That's the action, and then we lead into the difficulty that might make. So we'll copy and paste. And I might put up what we've worked on in Google Classroom in the Word document there, so you could take a look at that again if you want. Okay, so in this exercise, you will draft sentences. Okay, so write a dialogue quotation introduction for your thesis statement. Of course, we did that once already with Elaine Cliff's, right? A virtual community is the ultimate contradiction in terms. We could also, just looking at Jones, maybe, right? So we'll say, Carl Jones, or you could even lead with it. So you could say one of the biggest appeals of online education is a flexibility that the standard classroom cannot match. The standard classroom cannot match, states Carl Jones. So, right, there's our quotation, introduction, copy, paste. Then write a reaction introduction for your thesis statement. So looking again, right, at reaction. So that one to me is a little, it's not as clear cut, right? Action makes a lot of sense. You could see there's an action taking place. Obviously, dialogue, quotation, reaction. So, here they have the appeal of socializing online has created a nation of mobile device fans, many of whom can go barely 10 minutes without checking their smartphones. So we could put something like, looking at our statements here, maybe look at Cliff. You could use, a quotation just like they did for Mark Zuckerberg there. So we can look at, virtual community is the ultimate contradiction in terms, like saying one is fresh from the tennis court, or the second one here is really good. While some people find anonymity enabling and are able to bond with their online group and engage in true confessions, I find it very difficult to communicate with people for whom I have no face. Or you could come up with another one. So, so we'll go with Cliff there. Right, so reacting to the idea of online community. Okay, so put the quotation in there. No body language, no in the moment exchange. says Elaine. Okay. And these are all strategies, as I keep saying, just give me something to consider. You may find something that's better for you, as long as you sort of fall in line with the idea that it should, for an introduction, grab the reader's attention, immerse them in your subject, and transition into the thesis. And then for conclusion, right, it just needs to open with the idea of restating your thesis and then pointing out the various, summarizing your overall ideas. And so then it says choose the most effective introduction from items 4 to 6 above and type it in the space below. Then write a transition from the lead you select to your thesis. So from 4, 5, or 6, what do you all prefer? 4, where we did the action. 5 with a quotation, or 6 with a reaction. Anyone? 4, 5, or 6? Five. Okay, we'll go with 5 then. So we got our quotation. 5. All right. That's enough, I guess. 2 votes. 2 votes. That's all we need. So copy. One of the biggest appeals of online education is flexibility. That the standard. I need to put. Well, I can do that later. Again, not getting graded on this. It's not scoring it. It's all for practice. One of the biggest appeals of online education is a flexibility that the standard classroom cannot match, states Carl Jones. So then we write a transition from the lead, right, into our thesis. So we say, and this is largely just our words. We don't have to necessarily cite anything. So online has grown in popularity, but for some, the appeal is, well, let's see. You can also just, let's do this. For many seeking a return to school, online education may offer a pathway to completing a degree. Nevertheless, some suggest that online education may lack quality and creates difficulty for instructors. Okay, so sort of generally speaking, right, and making that transition into our thesis. So then we'll just go ahead and put our thesis that we used last time. And of course, we'll have to introduce Elaine Clift. So copy. This is probably going to be a weird format. Come on. Oh, I just messed up. So copy, paste. Yeah, we'll clean it up. Okay, there we go. So while Elaine Clift argues that online education lacks quality materials and is a poor time investment for teachers, Jones makes a better argument for online education as his point of view, reasons, and tone are more convincing. Okay, so we will copy all of that. I will paste it here. And I'll add that one here as well. Okay. All right. What do we have here? Oh. Oh, okay, so they didn't want me. Okay, so they just wanted to. So it's all kind of. Okay, so we'll go ahead and again, that's our thesis statement we've been working with. Right, that chat 2. And what we have here. This exercise, draft sentence that can be used in your conclusion of your essay. Remember that your conclusion should restate thesis and summarize the main points of the essay, as well as leave readers with a strong, memorable concluding thought or call to action. So select a concluding transition to open your conclusion, right? So we're looking at either right, anecdote, connection, or fact or statistic. Let me see what they want us to do next here. So write a summary of your thesis and the points and evidence you developed in lessons 2 through 4. So again, we're just looking at the transition here. So do we want to use an anecdote? Do we want to use a reaction? That's introduction, sorry. Do we want to use an anecdote? Do we want to use a connection? Or do we want to use a fact or statistic? Again, we could just go right back to what we used already, which was a statistic. Thoughts? We'll look at this conclusion here again. So I'll tell you what, we'll just go ahead and just used in conclusion last time. Just for the sake of something different, we'll just say finally. Right. And then next, write a summary of your thesis and the points of evidence you developed in lessons 2 through 4. So finally, and then let's restate our thesis here that we used earlier. Copy. Okay. Paste. And so they're looking here for an anecdote. So could use, I'll use my own experience. So while working a full-time job and becoming a first-time father, I found maintaining my status as a college student difficult. Fortunately, the options I had as an undergraduate to take a number of online classes allowed me to stay on track with completing my degree. Okay. So I found maintaining my status as a college student difficult. Fortunately, the options I had as an undergraduate to take a number of online classes. Wait a minute, that doesn't make sense. Fortunately, the options I had as an undergraduate to take online classes, don't need that over there, allowed me opportunities. I think that's probably a better word. Stay on track. And I'll say helped complete my degree. Yeah, there we go. That is the truth. Right, so put that in the chat too. And write a final thought that includes a connection with the reader. So we can include, again, that, 32%, or, maybe with the anecdote there. So, or maybe doing both. So, as Jones states, 32% of college students statistics show. I'm just going to copy that too. I'm struggling and I'm about to go cross-eyed, trying to do this here. Right. As Jones states, statistics show that about 32% of college students take at least one online class. This will be nice. This is going to really connect the reader. These numbers include students like me who would not have the opportunity to earn a degree without the option of online classes. Okay. So there we do something to connect the reader and use a statistic. Paste. Okay. Okay, and then write a final thought that includes a surprising factor statistic. Well, I think we did all of that together. So I'm just going to put this here. And I think they sort of, repeat this a little bit. So I used both of those strategies there. I connected the reader actually using the statistic and connected them with my anecdote. So sort of rolling multiple sort of strategies together. So then choose the most effective final thought from items 11 through 13 and type it in the space below. So we'll just go with we'll go with the anecdote. Right. So paste there. Copy. And again, you can draw on your personal experiences. You can use a statistic. You can sort of, make up some other sort of anecdote. The most important thing here is that you stay within the bounds of the passages. So let me go ahead. That is everything there. Do I need to follow up as far as like with any of the passages? Any more explanation? Was everybody able to get everything? That's a lot. And we slow it down to snail's pace to really dissect every little point, right? I mean, literally every sentence. We are dissecting every sentence of the introduction, of the conclusion, of the bodies of the paragraph. And sometimes I think, we kind of lose sight of what the overall objective is putting that all together into a final statement. 13, let's see here. Let me go back. Actually, let me go ahead. Let me stop recording first.